He crossed the white line, mocked centuries of tradition, and tossed a coin at the Queen's Guard, believing his money gave him the right to do anything. But what happened next silenced the crowd and made the tourist regret every move. Little did he know, this was only the beginning of a moment no one would ever forget. The day began like any other for Andrew Porter, a royal guard of Buckingham Palace. The light drizzle painted a muted grey over the London skyline, the kind of weather that tourists loved to hate but found so British. Positioned at his post, Andrew stood tall and unyielding, a human embodiment of centuries-old tradition. His bearskin hat set perfectly atop his head, a symbol of duty and respect. Around him, the usual sea of tourists swarmed, their cameras clicking incessantly, eager to capture their own slice of the palace's timeless majesty. Yet amidst this hum of admiration and awe, one voice grated like nails on a chalkboard. It belonged to a man who seemed to think his neon green fanny pack granted him dominion over history itself. "Hey, mate," he bellowed, loud enough to draw glances. "What do they pay you to stand there like that? Bet it's not enough to crack a smile, huh?" The crowd's laughter rippled uneasily. Some exchanged disapproving looks, while others, ever hungry for spectacle, edged closer. Andrew didn't move a muscle. His gaze remained fixed ahead, his posture immaculate. But silence, as it turned out, wasn't what this tourist wanted. "Oi, I'm talking to you, soldier boy," he barked, stepping over the pristine white line that separated spectators from tradition. This line wasn't just paint on the pavement, it was a boundary, a reminder of respect. Andrew's jaw tightened, almost imperceptibly, but he stayed rooted, the very picture of discipline. Inside, though, oh, inside, he probably wanted to roll his eyes so hard they'd orbit Big Ben. But Andrew wasn't that kind of man. He was duty personified, and his silence spoke louder than any retort. The tourist, emboldened by the lack of reaction, decided to up the ante. He leaned in closer, phone in hand, live streaming his own obnoxious behavior as if the world needed to see it. "Come on, give us a little wave for Instagram. It's not like you're busy or anything, right?" Then, as if mocking the centuries of tradition woven into Andrew's uniform wasn't enough, the man reached for the iconic bearskin hat. The collective gasp from the crowd was deafening. A few people murmured, their unease growing. Others, apparently desensitized by years of viral videos, simply lifted their own phones to capture the brewing confrontation. Andrew moved, just one step, but it was enough to silence the chatter. The sound of his boots hitting the stone courtyard was sharp, deliberate, like the toll of a bell. His voice, deep and commanding, cut through the air like a sword. "Step back, sir. Now!" For a brief moment, the tourist faltered. His hand hovered midair, caught between audacity and the realization that he'd just overstepped. But rather than retreat gracefully, he doubled down. Because, of course, he did. "Step back? You're kidding, right?" He sneered, tossing a coin onto the ground at Andrew's feet. "Here, take that. Maybe it'll help you loosen up. Dance for us, soldier boy." The coin rolled before settling, its hollow clink echoing ominously. The crowd's unease had turned to outright disapproval. Whispers spread like wildfire. "That's too far. Unbelievable. What's wrong with him?" But still, Andrew stood firm, his gaze like steel, his presence unshakable. And here's the thing, the tourist didn't see it. He didn't see the respect in Andrew's silence, the strength in his restraint. All he saw was an opportunity to entertain himself, to be the center of attention. And yet, in that moment, it wasn't Andrew who looked small. It wasn't Andrew who drew the crowd's scorn. The tourist, with his loud voice and louder fanny pack, had become the embodiment of everything wrong with the world's modern, selfie-stick-wielding entitlement. Andrew didn't move again. He didn't need to. His silence, his dignity, spoke volumes louder than any words could. But the air hung heavy with tension, as if even the weather was holding its breath. Something had to give. And soon, it would. The tension in the air was so thick you could have cut it with a butter knife. The obnoxious tourist was basking in a self-created spotlight, a smug grin plastered across his face as he adjusted his phone to get the perfect shot. Because clearly, in his world, disrespect wasn't just a pastime. It was a performance, But then, something unexpected pierced through the chaos. "Mummy, I can't see," a small, trembling voice called out, soft yet powerful enough to ripple through the crowd. Heads turned, and there he was. A boy no older than 6, seated in a wheelchair at the back of the throng. His pale face and thin frame told a story of struggle far greater than anyone there could comprehend. His mother, crouched beside him, was doing her best to lift his spirits, but her weary eyes betrayed a quiet despair. She wanted her son to experience this moment, to feel a part of something larger than himself, but the wall of adults and camera phones blocked their view, an unintentional yet cruel barrier. Andrew noticed them immediately. How could he not? The boy's wistful gaze felt like a plea, a silent call for kindness in a world that often forgets the smallest among us. Protocol screamed at him to stay still, to remain the unshakable symbol of tradition. But something deeper, a sense of humanity that no rulebook could override, urged him to act. And then there was the tourist. Oh, he was still there, oblivious as ever. While others in the crowd began to notice the boy and his mother, the tourist doubled down on his antics. He waved his phone in Andrew's face, mocking him with a faux serious tone. "Come on, mate, give us a little salute. It's for the followers, don't be shy." The audacity was almost impressive, wasn't it? Almost. But Andrew had made his decision. Slowly, deliberately, he broke protocol. He took a single, measured step forward, his boots striking the stone with a sound that silenced even the most restless among the crowd. The chatter faded, replaced by a collective intake of breath. What was he doing? Wasn't he supposed to stay still? Andrew didn't falter. Each step he took toward the boy felt purposeful, like the unfolding of a timeless story. When he reached the child, he knelt down, his towering figure suddenly becoming small, approachable, human. From his pocket, Andrew pulled a pristine white handkerchief, folding it with the same precision he applied to his uniform every morning. He extended it toward the boy with both hands, as if offering a royal gift. "For a young gentleman," he said, his voice warm but still carrying the weight of tradition. The boy's face transformed, his eyes lighting up with unfiltered joy. He reached out, his small fingers clutching the handkerchief, as if it were a treasure from the Queen herself. "Thank you, sir," the boy exclaimed, his voice ringing with pure, childlike wonder. His mother's tears began to flow, but she smiled through them, whispering a heartfelt, "Bless you," to Andrew. The crowd was utterly still, as if the very air had paused to absorb the moment. And then, like a tide swelling from the depths, a murmur of admiration began to ripple. "He's amazing. Look at that boy's smile." That's what respect looks like. But, of course, there was one person who couldn't leave well enough alone. "Oh, come on," the tourist scoffed, clearly annoyed that his performance had been upstaged. "It's just a kid. What's the big deal?" And that's when the floodgates opened. "Maybe you should learn some manners," a woman from the crowd snapped, her voice sharp enough to cut through the tourist's bravado. "Seriously, who raised you?" Another chimed in, arms crossed and eyes blazing with indignation. "Have some respect, I'd say." The tide of public opinion had officially turned, and the tourist, once so confident in his antics, now looked like a deer caught in headlights. His smirk faltered, his gaze darting around as if searching for an escape route. Meanwhile, Andrew rose to his full height, his imposing figure radiating a quiet strength that demanded respect without uttering a single word. His posture was regal, unshakable, and it silenced the crowd more effectively than any command. The tourist, now visibly uncomfortable, took a shaky step back. He muttered something under his breath, something no one cared to hear, and melted into the crowd, his grand performance reduced to nothing more than an embarrassing memory. Andrew didn't look at him. He didn't need to. His attention was solely on the boy, who clutched the handkerchief to his chest like a knight holding a royal decree. And in that moment, the air felt lighter, the drizzle softer, as if even the weather had been moved by what had just unfolded. For a brief, awkward moment, the tourist stood frozen, his confidence unraveling like a cheap thread. His earlier bravado, so loud and obnoxious, now hung limp as the crowd shifted their attention from him to the small boy clutching Andrew's handkerchief. But it didn't end there. In an age where no moment goes undocumented, A woman in the crowd had captured the entire interaction on her phone. With a decisive tap, she began a live stream, her voice clear and sharp as she narrated the scene. Unbelievable. This guy thought it was funny to harass a Queen's Guard, but look at that child. This is what respect really looks like, she said, zooming in on Andrew's towering figure and the boy's radiant smile. The internet wasted no time. Comments poured in faster than a London downpour. What a disgrace to treat a guard like that. Shame on him. This soldier just showed more humanity in 2 minutes than that tourist probably has in his entire life. Somebody find out who that tourist is and revoke his passport. Back at the scene, the mood had shifted entirely. A ripple of applause began to spread, starting with the boy's mother, who clapped slowly but deliberately. It caught on like wildfire, the scattered claps joining into a thunderous ovation. Andrew, ever composed, returned to his post with the same calm dignity he'd shown throughout. But there was a glint in his eye, just a flicker of satisfaction that even his stoic expression couldn't fully conceal. Meanwhile, the tourist? Oh, he tried to slink away, his once flashy confidence reduced to a meek shuffle. The same phones that had been pointed at Andrew were now turned on him, documenting his retreat with a mix of judgment and schadenfreude. "Where are you going?" a voice from the crowd called out, dripping with sarcasm. "Don't you want to finish your performance?" The man's pace quickened. His fanny pack jiggled with every hurried step, a visual metaphor for the absurdity of his earlier behavior. Andrew, of course, didn't acknowledge him. Why would he? The tourist was no longer the center of attention. That honor now belonged to the boy, who waved his handkerchief proudly like a tiny flag of triumph. And then it happened. Just as Andrew resumed his stoic stance, a small voice rang out, piercing the applause. "You're my hero, sir." The crowd fell silent for a split second, the words hanging in the air like a benediction. And then the applause roared back to life, louder and more heartfelt than before. Tears shimmered in more than a few eyes, the raw emotion of the moment binding everyone together. Even those who had initially come for a quick selfie left with something far more meaningful, a story of respect, dignity, and humanity that they would carry with them long after their vacation ended. And Andrew? He didn't break character, not a word, not a smile. But as the applause swelled, he made a small, almost imperceptible gesture. He adjusted his bearskin hat. It wasn't much, but it was enough. A quiet reminder that the Queen's Guard wasn't just a relic of the past. It was alive, enduring, and filled with people like Andrew, who upheld its traditions with unshakable grace. As the crowd slowly dispersed, they left behind not just a few scattered coins and camera flashes, but a renewed sense of what it meant to honor something greater than oneself.